You wake up before the sun rises, if wake is the right word for what just happened. One moment, you were floating somewhere between a dream about a warm tavern and a mild toothache, and the next, your forehead thudded against a low timber beam, and you're very much back aboard a creaking wooden tub of a ship. The smell hits you first, sweat old wool seawater, and a hint of regret. The wool blanket wrapped around you doesn't belong to you. Nothing does, really. This one's a communal heirloom, soaked through with the memories and body odor of every sailor who's had the misfortune of sleeping in this bunk before you. You're fairly certain there's a rat inside it, and you're not even mad. He was probably here before you. You swing your feet down, and your left toe knocks into a wooden bucket, someone's private stash of onions rags, or possibly both. You curse softly, not because you're polite, but because Oswin, the bunkmate beside you, is still asleep. If you wake him, he'll spend the whole morning describing his dreams in excruciating detail. You've suffered through his dream about the talking squid 3 times now. You hunch low and begin your awkward shuffle through the cramped passage between bunks. The entire crew sleeps like salt fish, stacked and packed. Your back brushes against ropes, elbows boots, and at one point, what might be someone's pickled eel jar. The floor groans beneath your feet, not because you're heavy, but because the ship is older than sin and twice as cranky. She groans when you step, groans when you breathe, and sometimes groans just to remind you she can. The first bell clangs overhead, not a friendly bell, more like someone banging on a soup pot with a broken bone. That's the signal for the morning watch to rise. You wish you weren't part of the morning watch, but you made a deal with the sea and the man who signs your pay, and neither of them is particularly known for kindness. You grab your shirt from the hook. It's still damp. Not from last night's rain, there was no rain. Just the kind of deep, mysterious damp that lives aboard every ship. A dampness that seeps into socks, dreams, and personal dignity. You climb the ladder to the main deck, careful not to slip on the last 2 steps, which are always slick. No one knows why. Some say it's salt spray. Others say it's gremlins. You suspect it's grease from that one sailor who uses goose fat on his boots to ward off sea demons. The sky greets you with a color that isn't quite morning and isn't quite night. A cold wind slaps your face in greeting. You pull your damp collar tighter and blink into the distance. The sea stretches forever, as usual. The horizon wears its usual blank expression. Somewhere off to starboard, a gull screams at you, possibly for waking up. Bartram is already on deck, shaving his face with a rusted knife that should have been retired when the previous king died. He shaves every morning, though no one's seen a single hair on his face in years. When asked why he once replied, "It's to remind myself I'm still alive." You've learned not to ask Bartram things. Someone below decks coughs, someone else swears, and up on the quarterdeck the first mate is already scowling into the wind like it owes him money. You make your way to the ropes and begin the first task of the day, hauling on a line that seems to get heavier with every pull. It smells of brine old fish and misery. Every so often it whips backward, unexpectedly catching someone on the shin, or worse, on the pride. Wilkin, the youngest among you, always seems to be standing in exactly the wrong spot. Today is no different. A sudden jerk, as a yelp, and Wilkin's flat on his back, blinking at the sky. You all pretend not to laugh, loudly. Breakfast comes in the form of hardtack and something pretending to be dried beef. The hardtack is older than you are, and louder too. You nearly chip a tooth just examining it. You dip it in seawater to soften it. It doesn't help. You chew anyway, like a man chewing through life itself. The ship smells as always of wood tar rope and man. No perfume on earth quite captures it. It's a scent that says, you're not on land anymore, and land may not take you back. You lean on the rail for a moment and stare out at the open water. No ships in sight, no islands, no monsters, just sea, endless lapping sea. It's strangely comforting in the way only something enormous and impersonal can be. You glance down. A rat scurries past your boot, dragging something that once resembled cheese. You nod to him respectfully. He's part of the crew after all. Gets around faster than Wilkin and complains less. The sun finally makes an appearance just barely, and the wind picks up. The sails billow above you, snapping and groaning. Somewhere behind you, a shipmate begins humming a tune that might be a sea shanty or might be a prayer. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. You rub your eyes, take a long breath of salt air, and remind yourself that the day is just beginning. There will be more ropes, more biscuits, more rats, but also somewhere in the middle of all that, maybe a moment of calm, a wink from the sea, a stretch of stillness where you forget the blisters on your hands and remember why you came out here in the first place. Maybe, but probably not. There is no rooster on this ship. Roosters, as it turns out, are poor sailors. They complain, they flutter, they fall off things, and no one wants to clean up after them. And besides, who needs a rooster when you've got a bell? The ship's bell is your rooster. It doesn't crow, it clangs, loudly, repeatedly, and with no trace of mercy. It hangs there just above the quarterdeck, polished only when someone is being punished and rung with great enthusiasm by the ship's boy, who always seems to take far too much joy in the task. 4 bells means the start of the morning watch. That's when you roll out of your hammock, or more likely fall out, and begin the slow process of becoming human again. You don't leap into action, no one does. You unfold yourself carefully like a damp letter and curse the morning into existence. The other sailors begin to stir, groaning like the ship's timbers. No one speaks at first. You just blink at each other with swollen eyes and try to remember where you left your other sock. It's probably wedged under a barrel or being used as a pillow by someone else. The communal understanding is finders keepers, especially when it comes to dry socks. A few of the men have tricks for waking up. Some slap their cheeks, others mutter little prayers. Bartram, of course, goes back to shaving. And then there's old Hal, who starts each day by dumping a ladle of seawater over his head. He swears it tightens the spirit. You think it mostly tightens the skin and annoys anyone standing too close. Today, someone, probably Wilkin, has spilled a tin of oil near the stairs. You almost slip on it again. You vow to toss him overboard one day, lovingly, gently, with a smile. On deck, the cold hits you like a sermon. It's not cruel, just persistent. The wind insists on getting into your collar, behind your ears, down your boots. It plays with your clothing like a mischievous child. You tug your sleeves down and pretend not to shiver. The bell rings again, reminding everyone of their place in the grand and underpaid hierarchy. The first mate appears from the captain's quarters, already scowling, holding a ledger, and a scowl that could curdle cream. He says nothing he doesn't have to. His mere presence makes everyone work slightly faster and breathe slightly quieter. You head toward your station. Today it's sail duty. Again, it's always sail duty. The sails are your eternal companions. You've patched them, hauled them, cursed them, and on one awkward occasion been tangled in one and left hanging upside down for half an hour, while the rest of the crew pretended not to notice. A few men begin coiling ropes in what they claim is an efficient pattern, but really just looks like seaweed after a storm. You try not to get involved. Rope work is political. Everyone has an opinion, and all of them are wrong. Then comes the morning roll call. The first mate calls out names, and you answer with a grunt or a hand wave. He checks each man off, like he's counting spoons. When someone doesn't answer, the mate just marks maybe sleeping or possibly dead and moves on. Efficiency, after all. Someone starts singing. It's too early for singing. It's always too early for singing. But it's usually Wilkin who insists that his voice calms the waves. You disagree. The waves, if anything, seem slightly irritated, but no one tells him to stop. There's something comforting about bad singing in the morning. Like a cat wailing outside your window, it's awful, but it lets you know the world is still turning. Breakfast is served if served means handed to you in a dented tin cup with a glare. You get your portion of ship's biscuit, brick-like full of mystery holes, and something that once resembled beans. The biscuit requires soaking or a strong jaw. You dip it in your tea, which tastes like warm rainwater strained through an old boot. But it's hot, and that's what matters. There is a brief, sacred moment where everyone just eats in silence, chewing, staring into the gray morning. You imagine you're a duck, a very tired duck, a duck with taxes to pay. Suddenly, a shout, sail ho, but it's just a gull, or a very optimistic piece of sea foam. False alarms happen often. They're more entertainment than anything, like playing peekaboo with the ocean. You resume your morning tasks. Some scrub the deck, others mend torn canvas. You're tasked with checking the barrels in the hold. You descend into the gloom past creaking boards and the occasional spider and take inventory of salted pork, dried apples, and one barrel that no one admits to knowing the origin of. It smells faintly of pickles and vengeance. Back up on deck, someone's tying knots for no reason at all. Decorative knots. Sailors love tying things. If left alone for too long, they'll start knotting their own shoelaces into little sculptures. It's like therapy, but with rope and quiet muttering. As the sun climbs higher, still hiding behind clouds, mind you, the ship begins to hum. The crew finds its rhythm. A little grumbling, a little joking, a few belches, and the occasional chorus of, "Oh, where's my other sock?" It's a strange little world afloat out here. No roosters, no roads, just bells, boots, biscuits, and the endless whisper of the wind. But you've grown to like it, or at least to tolerate it with grace. And as you lean back against a rail, slick with salt, and watch the gulls wheel and scream above you, think to yourself, yes, this is what morning looks like when the sea is your landlord and the stars are your ceiling. You yawn, you stretch, you try to remember what day it is. Then you give up because out here it doesn't matter. Breakfast on land is a thing of dreams, hot loaves of crusty bread eggs that haven't rolled off the table, soft cheese with herbs, a mug of something warm that doesn't taste like regret. Out here, though, breakfast is less a meal and more a negotiation with fate. You begin by fishing your rations out of a damp burlap sack. The cook may his wooden spoon rest gently upon his shoulder, has already done the portioning, which is to say, he's dropped exactly one biscuit, exactly one fistful of peas, and one unfortunate lump of salted meat onto your tin plate. The plate is dented. It's always dented. You once asked for a new one, and the cook laughed so hard he dropped his spoon into the fire. The biscuit or hardtack is not food in the usual sense. It is, depending on who you ask, a weapon, a building material, or a theological test. Its corners are sharp enough to draw blood if you bite it wrong. Its surface is studded with pockmarks, some say from baking, others say from insects. You've long stopped wondering. You just scrape off what moves, soften it in your tea, and chew with the kind of determination once reserved for breaking curses. This morning's tea is a bit more adventurous than usual. A deep, murky brown flecked with something green and suspiciously floating. The cook claims it's forest leaf. You suspect it's laundry runoff. Still, it's warm. That counts for something. The salted meat has a name technically, but no one uses it anymore. It used to be pork. Now it's just that. It's grayish. It glistens slightly. You chew it slowly, thinking of happier meals. The flavor is something between seaweed and rope, but it fills your belly, and that's the goal. You sit on an overturned barrel to eat careful to avoid the leaking side. The sun is trying, bless it, to break through the clouds, but it only succeeds in lighting the fog. A few gulls swirl overhead. One of them lands nearby and stares at you with what feels like judgment. You toss a pea at it. It dodges effortlessly and then mocks you with a squawk. Around you, the rest of the crew is chewing, sipping, sighing. It's a communal orchestra of miserable mastication. Wilkin bites too hard into his biscuit and yelps, holding his jaw like he's been punched by the Pope. Old Hal dips his bread into his tea until it turns to mush and slurps it like a soup. Bartram chews slowly, stoically, as if each bite is a test of character. A few men eat while standing backs against the railing eyes on the sea. That's the romantic way to do it. It makes you feel like a real sailor, strong, solitary, with the wind in your beard, but also cold, unbalanced, and very likely to drop your biscuit into the drink. You tried it once. Your biscuit did not float, nor did your patience. Today, someone decides to bring up the worm. Every ship has one story that won't die. On this ship, it's the tale of the worm found inside a biscuit. Not just any worm, mind you, a worm wearing a tiny sailor hat, according to Oswin. He swears it waved at him. The cook denies everything. You personally think it's a metaphor, or maybe it wasn't a worm. Maybe it was just a really motivated raisin. Regardless, every time someone mentions the worm, at least 2 sailors check their biscuit more carefully than usual. Wilkin even sniffs his. You roll your eyes and eat your food like a grown man who's accepted that life, much like his breakfast, will never be perfect. The conversation shifts, as it always does, to food fantasies. The crew begins to list things they miss, from land-roasted, duck-spiced wine apples that crunch instead of collapse. Someone brings up soft cheese, and everyone sighs in unison, like monks hearing an ancient hymn. Then someone mentions custard. Half the crew falls silent, stunned by the memory. Bartram wipes a tear from his cheek. You, however, are thinking about fresh bread, a loaf still warm from the oven, the smell of it, the way it crumbles just slightly when you tear it with your hands. You chew your hardtack a bit more solemnly after that. The contrast is cruel. Midway through breakfast, the ship gives a lurch. Not a big one, just a reminder that she's still alive, still shifting her weight, still holding all of you far, far away from any tavern. Your tea sloshes. Someone's biscuit slides off their plate and skitters across the deck like a mouse. It is not retrieved. After breakfast, the plates are collected and rinsed in a bucket of seawater, which somehow makes them dirtier. The cook gives everyone a nod that says try not to die before lunch, and disappears below deck with a grunt and a spoon in his belt like a sword. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve. You don't bother looking for a napkin. There hasn't been a napkin on this ship in ever. A seagull screeches again. You glance up just in time to see it relieving itself onto the mainsail. You wonder if that's a blessing or a curse in some forgotten sailor folklore. You decide it's neutral and move on. Salt clings to your beard. Crumbs cling to your teeth. Somewhere in the world, a nobleman is eating figs with silver forks. Meanwhile, you are content almost with the quiet rhythm of breakfast at sea. You stretch. You belch softly. You return your plate. And with your teeth still tingling from the biscuit and your stomach only halfway satisfied, you step back into the labor of the day. Because breakfast on a ship isn't meant to fill you up. It's meant to remind you you're still alive. You still have teeth, and for now, you're not the worm in someone else's biscuit. Let us speak for a moment of dignity, or rather of its absence, particularly at sea. There are many things a sailor learns to live without clean clothes, privacy bread that doesn't chip a molar. But perhaps the most humbling of all sacrifices is the act of relieving oneself with grace. For here on this fine floating crate, there is no such thing as a proper toilet. Instead, there is the chamber pot, or rather, several chamber pots scattered like mysterious relics throughout the lower deck. Each one is a battered wooden bucket with a handle usually splintered and a particular smell that can only be described as fermented embarrassment. The unspoken rule is use the pot only when absolutely necessary and return it empty. One must always return it empty. It is the highest law, ranking just above don't steal rations and never question the cook's meat. You wake up early enough to avoid the line. That's the trick. No one enjoys waiting for a turn behind the curtain of a hung-up sail while the whole ship creaks and everyone pretends not to listen. Privacy here is made of noise, not walls. You clear your throat loudly. Others do the same, a chorus of polite denial. Now comes the dreaded part, carrying the full chamber pot above deck to empty it over the side. You grip the handle with both hands and hold it slightly away from your body. One does not cradle a chamber pot. One distances oneself spiritually, if not physically. As you ascend the steps carefully, you are joined by another sailor doing the same. The two of you exchange a solemn nod. No words. There is nothing to say. You are comrades in an ancient and disgusting ritual. Outside, the wind is sharp and lively. The ship lurches just a touch to port. You adjust your grip. One splash here could ruin a week's worth of socks, not that you have that many to spare. You reach the rail. There's a spot just to the right of the bow, unofficially reserved for this purpose. It is worn smooth by countless other humiliations. You lift the pot aim for the sea and pour. The wind, mischievous as always, gives a sudden gust. You take a hasty sidestep to avoid blowback. Success, barely. You glance up and see a few gulls watching. You imagine they're judging you. Perhaps they are. But then one of them dives beak first into a pile of fish guts, and you feel better about yourself. The pot is now empty. You give it a good rinse with seawater from a bucket nearby the cleaning station, though the term is optimistic at best, and return it below deck with the air of a man who has survived a minor but meaningful trial. Some sailors, like Oswin, wait until nightfall. They say it's more private, more peaceful. You suspect they're just scared of the gulls. Others, like old Hal, refuse to use the pot altogether. He claims to have mastered the fine art of hanging over the side of the ship while keeping both balance and dignity. You've seen this art once. It was neither balanced nor dignified. And then there are the new lads, the green ones, the ones who ask bright-eyed, is there a latrine? You remember asking that yourself years ago. You remember the silence that followed, and then the laughter, and then someone handed you the bucket. It's strange what becomes normal. A man can get used to anything: smelly hammocks, stormy nights, salted fish for breakfast. Even this, even the daily chamber pot dance with its delicate choreography and very real risk of becoming the ship's next punchline. You return to the main deck just in time to see Bartram cleaning his hands with a rag that was once white, now a dubious shade of something between brown and seaweed. He nods at you. You nod back. It's not friendship exactly, but it is mutual respect forged in the fires of shared inconvenience. Back near the mast, Wilkin is trying to fix a line and failing. He's tugging at it like a man wrestling a sea serpent. You consider helping, but he looks so earnest in his struggle, and frankly, you're still emotionally recovering from the chamber pot. The sun has finally decided to peek through the clouds. It's a pale, watery light, but it does make the sea sparkle just a little. You lean against the rail on the clean side, of course, and breathe in deeply. The salt air is fresh, brisk, and just barely tinged with the scent of someone else's mistake, drifting by on the breeze. There are moments like this, quiet and odd, where the life of a sailor almost feels poetic. Almost. The pot is returned. The deck is steady beneath your feet for now. And somewhere down below, someone else is preparing for their own careful journey to the edge of the world wooden bucket, in hand-eyes on the wind heart full of hope. Such is life at sea. Such is the ritual. And as you walk away, satisfied that the ordeal is behind you, you hear the unmistakable sound of a bucket tipping, followed by a shout, and then a very wet curse. You smile. It's Wilkin again. Breakfast may not have settled, but your mood has lifted. You've eaten, you've emptied, you've dodged the gulls and the cook's scowl, which means unfortunately it's time to work. Well, work. It begins with the watch rotation. Your name's been scribbled in the logbook under mid-morning lookouts, a job that sounds important, but mostly involves standing still, squinting at waves, and pretending you know what you're looking for. You find your spot at the starboard rail boots, firmly planted on the salt-slick deck. The sky's lighter now, though the clouds are still having an argument about whether they plan to let the sun through. The wind flaps at your collar and carries with it that familiar cocktail of sea air, rotting rope, and maybe just maybe fish. You stare and keep staring. Every so often you nod thoughtfully, just in case the first mate happens to glance your way. It's important to look like you've just spotted something extremely subtle, like a suspicious wave or a particularly philosophical cloud. The secret to being on watch is not about spotting things. It's about posture. You stand tall, you cross your arms, you tilt your head slightly to one side, as if your very soul is locked in a deep conversation with the horizon. You furrow your brow not from concentration, but from sunlight and chronic biscuit chewing. Occasionally someone yells sail just to break the silence. Everyone jumps. Then comes the squinting, the whispering, the heavy suspense. Turns out it's a cloud, or a whale spout, or a large, suspiciously upright bird. You nod solemnly. Could have been a galley, you mutter. Everyone agrees, because no one wants to admit they can't tell a ship from a cloud when seen from 100 miles away through one functional eye. A few seagulls coast nearby. You eye them with suspicion. These are not your average gulls. These are sea-hardened, cunning birds who know how to hover just long enough to relieve themselves directly onto your hat. You keep a hand ready to deflect just in case. Wilkin is on the opposite side of the deck, also on watch. His strategy involves resting his chin on the rail and letting drool slowly collect on the wood. It's a bold interpretation of the job. You consider reporting him, but honestly, he's not doing any worse than you are. A crewmate sidles up beside you and mutters, "Think that's land out there?" He points dramatically. You follow his finger, squint hard, and see nothing, just water, all the way down to forever. You say might be, could be a trick of the light. This is sailor language for no idea, but let's pretend we know what we're doing. Sometimes someone swears they see a sea monster. Everyone loves that. It means you can argue about what kind. Is it the serpent with fins like sails, the one with the horned tail and glowing eyes, or just old Hal floating on his back again? No one ever agrees, and that's the best part. Back to your job, watching, waiting, breathing. The sails creak above you full, but not straining. A good wind today. Not so fast as to toss you about, not so slow as to stall. The kind of wind that carries you gently but firmly forward, like a grandmother with opinions. Down below the cook bangs pots. Someone's fixing a pulley with language not approved by the church. Somewhere a fiddle squeaks a tune that only barely resembles music. And you're watching the ocean as if it might blink. You run a hand over your beard, now salty again. Always salty. Even when you wash it, you suspect the salt is part of you now. You are 40% man, 30% rope burn, and 30% dried cod. Now and then a small school of fish flashes near the surface. You point it out to the man nearest you, and he nods as if you've delivered a divine vision. You both stand in silence as though what you've witnessed will one day be immortalized in song. It will not. Then comes the real enemy of watch duty boredom. It sneaks up slowly like mist on a cold morning. First your shoulders droop, then your knees begin to wobble. Eventually your eyelids feel like they're weighted with cannonballs. You fight it. You whistle softly. You hum a sea shanty. You count clouds. Bartram once tried keeping a diary during his watch shift. After the third page of Still Nothing, Water is Wet, he gave up and went back to squinting nobly. You spot a bit of driftwood bobbing in the waves. You consider alerting the crew. Then again, it's just driftwood. You begin imagining what kind of tree it once was. An old pine, a sacred cypress, a shipwreck from centuries past. Then you name it Reginald. You give it a backstory. Reginald was once a proud mast struck by lightning in a storm while defending his schooner from pirates. Now he floats the open sea, dreaming of sails and glory days. You feel a little better, having given meaning to the meaningless. That's what watch duty does to you. Turns driftwood into nobility gulls, into spies, and clouds into castles. Eventually the bell rings. Your shift is over. You've stared into the middle distance so hard that your brain feels like soup. You step back from the rail, your legs remembering how to move like a human's. Wilkin is still drooling on the deck. You gently kick the sole of his boot. Your turn's up, lad. He blinks. I was praying, he mutters, as if that makes sense. You nod solemnly. Of course. And with that, you trade your post for something far more meaningful, swabbing the deck, where at least the water doesn't judge you back. It's amazing how many ways a man can be asked to pull on a rope. There are subtle ways. Give it a heave there, lad. There are less subtle ways you call that pulling. My grandmother's apron's tighter than that line. And then there's the universal method, someone shouting now, while everything around you begins to swing ominously. Rope work is the heart of the sailor's daily torment, sorry discipline. And there is a lot of it. Ropes to hoist the sails, ropes to secure the masts, ropes to tie barrels, ropes to tie other ropes and ropes, whose original purpose has long been forgotten, but are still revered like sacred relics. You're handed a coil of it not long after your watch duty ends. It's heavy, it's damp, and it smells like every fish that ever died. The bosun growls at you to check the main halyard with all the ambiguity of a cryptic prophecy. You nod as if you understand, even though you're pretty sure the main halyard is somewhere up, possibly near a sail, possibly not. You walk slowly, pretending to look purposeful, glancing upward at a tangle of rigging that might as well be a spider's worst nightmare. You spot 3 ropes that could be the one you're meant to inspect. You pick the least frayed and start pulling on it thoughtfully, pausing now and then to squint at it with great theatrical concern. It's the sailor's way. If you look confident enough while doing something questionable, odds are no one will question you, at least not immediately. And if they do, you simply say, I was following orders, then point vaguely at a superior and walk briskly in the other direction. Knots, of course, are the jewel in the sailor's tangled crown. There's the bowline, the clove hitch, the rolling hitch, the sheet bend, the figure 8, and something Wilkin calls the rabbit snare special, which has never been successfully undone once tied. The thing about knots is that every sailor claims to know more than the next man. Even if his knots look like angry seaweed, he will insist loudly that his knot has held against 3 typhoons and a jealous wife. This is not always metaphorical. You tie a basic bowline and inspect it with the air of a sculptor admiring his latest marble bust. It holds, mostly. Bartram walks by, glances at your knot, and grunts a noise that could mean approval or despair. Hard to tell with Bartram. Old Hal, on the other hand, spends his afternoons tying knots into his beard. He claims it strengthens the soul. You think he's just bored. Either way, he once tied his mustache to the railing during a storm and had to cut himself free with a rusty spoon. There's a rhythm to rope work. You pull loop cinch tighten, you curse, you undo, you redo, you spit on it, you slap it. Then someone else comes by and unties everything and starts over. It's a group effort the way an argument at a family dinner is a group effort. The ropes themselves seem to have opinions. Some are stiff as iron, some are slick as eels, some unravel just from looking at them. Others refuse to bend no matter how much you beg. They smell of tar sweat and the 1,000 hands that have yanked them before you. A new sailor, bless his innocence, asks what the rope is made of. You consider replying regret, but instead mutter something about hemp and hope he doesn't ask again. The bosun shouts again from the bow, something about the staysail line. You look busy. That's the trick, look busy enough that you're not worth redirecting. If you're lucky, someone slower will get there first. If you're unlucky, you'll be handed the big coil, the wet one, the one that somehow smells of cabbage, though it has never met a vegetable. Sometimes you catch yourself humming while you work. A low, tuneless sound passed down from sailor to sailor. No one knows the words. They're not important. The hum keeps the rhythm, keeps your fingers moving, keeps your mind from drifting to things like land taverns or the increasingly soggy state of your socks. Occasionally, the ship creaks just right, and a line goes taut, with a twang like a harp in distress. A man yells. A seagull flaps away. Something falls. You pause. Nothing explodes. You carry on. You notice Wilkin nearby proudly showing someone a knot he's just tied around a barrel. It is the ugliest thing you've ever seen, a bulbous, mangled mess of loops and tension as though the rope is trying to escape itself. He beams like a father showing off his firstborn. Solid knot, he says. It has character, you reply. That's sailor language for it'll probably fail, but not immediately. By mid-morning, the ropes have all been inspected and adjusted, and several have been left in mysterious new formations no one quite recognizes. But no one complains. The sails still hold, the masts still stand, the ship still moves forward, which by sea standards is considered a triumph. You lean against a post-hands raw shirt, sticking slightly to your back from the effort. Someone offers you a sip of something that might be tea. You sip it anyway. It's mostly warm. That's all that matters. And as you look up at the web of ropes overhead, swinging gently in the breeze, like a ship-sized marionette, you feel, if only for a moment, a strange pride. The sea may take many things from a man, but it gives him knots in return. Now there are captains, and then there's your captain. You've never seen him without his hat. Not once. Not even during storms when the wind tried to peel the sails off the mast like fruit skin. Not even during that time the galley fire got out of control, and someone, Wilkin, of course, accidentally used the rum barrel to put it out. The hat is ever present, immovable, unflappable, and to your continued astonishment, utterly ridiculous. It's a broad-feathered monstrosity, somewhere between a musketeer's flourish and a lampshade in mourning. navy blue trimmed in faded gold, topped with a plume that waggles with surprising arrogance in even the gentlest breeze. Rumor has it the feather came from an albatross. Others say it's a goose feather dyed with crushed blueberries. Either way, it moves with a strange sentience, as if it knows it's better than you. The captain himself is a man of few words and many frowns. Tall, pale, with a beard that looks like it was drawn on in charcoal. His boots click when he walks, not stomp, not shuffle click. And everyone listens. Not because he shouts, he never does. He doesn't have to. The hat speaks for him. One time, a storm broke out, with such force that men were sliding across the deck like boiled onions in a hot pan. The sails tore, ropes screamed, waves the size of small cities crashed over the bow. The captain emerged from his quarters, coat billowing, eyes narrowed, hat completely intact. He pointed once, just once, and the chaos began to resolve itself. You sometimes wonder if the hat commands the weather. No one really knows where it came from. Theories abound. Some say it was a gift from an admiral. Others believe he won it in a duel of wits with a French nobleman. Wilkin once claimed he overheard the captain whispering to it. You find that hard to believe. The captain doesn't whisper. He glowers at different volumes. One quiet morning, you and Bartram were coiling rope when the captain walked by. Not a word. Just that click-click of his boots and the rustle of feathers. Bartram, usually unshakable, saluted so fast he nearly threw his own shoulder. You tried to nod calmly, but your eyes were drawn magnetically, helplessly to the hat. It looked shinier than usual, as though it had been freshly oiled, or perhaps it sweats confidence. Some sailors say the captain owns other hats hidden away in a locked trunk in his cabin. One for duels, one for funerals, one allegedly for romantic engagements. You've never seen these hats. You don't want to. You're not sure the human mind is built for such things. The ship has only one rule that's enforced by everyone. No one touches the hat, not even accidentally. Years ago, a curious sailor named Nestor, young, foolish, soft in the eyes, brushed the brim while helping the captain with his coat. The silence that followed was heavier than iron. The captain didn't say a word. He simply stared at Nestor until the lad excused himself, climbed down into the hold, and spent 3 days cleaning barrels as penance. No one ever saw Nestor near the captain again. Last you heard, he joined a monastery, a dry one, far inland. Still, despite all that, there's an odd affection for the hat. It's become part of the ship, like the creak of the timbers or the smell of boiled peas. You draw it when you doodle. You reference it when you swear. If this knot holds, I'll eat the captain's hat, Wilkins said once. Everyone went quiet. He apologized immediately, out loud, to the sky. In a strange way, the hat brings comfort. When it appears above the quarterdeck, bobbing along like the masthead of a fancier ship, it means things are under control. The ship is still afloat. The course is still true. The world, while unpredictable, still contains constants, and one of them is that hat. On dull days, you and a few others sometimes take bets on what angle the feather will settle at. Straight up, slightly left limp and moody. You keep a tally scratched on the inside of your boot. So far, wistful tilt is winning. You once tried to imagine the captain without it. Just a head. A plain human head with hair. Maybe a scar. Maybe ears. You couldn't do it. Your mind rebelled. The hat is the head now. You suspect even the captain would feel uncomfortable without it, like forgetting a tooth or losing one sock. Of course, you'd never say any of this out loud. You respect the captain. You also fear the hat. And so, each morning as the sun tries to squeeze through the mist and the ship heaves in that ever so slightly seasick rhythm, you look up to the quarterdeck and find him there, boots planted, eyes steady plume, whispering to the breeze. And you know in your salt-washed heart that all is well, even if the sky turns green, even if the cook serves shoe soup again, even if the rope comes undone and Wilkin ends up dangling by his trousers from the mainsail. The hat remains, and so you smile. You tug your collar straight, and you return to your duties, rope in hand, salt in beard, secure in the knowledge that while you may be tired, hungry, and slightly damp at all times, you are at least under the command of a man with impeccable headwear. Boredom at sea is unlike any boredom on land. It's not the kind you get waiting in line or sitting through a long sermon. No, this is a special kind of boredom, vast, oceanic, a boredom that swells and stretches like a sail left to flap without purpose. It wraps itself around you like sea mist, soft at first, then heavy, until even your thoughts begin to creak. And from this boredom comes stories. You're sitting on a coil of rope, half-heartedly rubbing tar on a splintered beam when old Hal sidles up beside you. He's chewing something, could be tobacco, could be dried mushroom. You don't ask. His eyes are fixed on the waves. Mermaid day, he mutters. You blink. Beg pardon. He points with a crusty finger toward a patch of sea no different from the rest. Feel it in my bones. They always show up when the sea's that exact shade of tired. You nod slowly because that's the proper response when Hal speaks in riddles. Every sailor worth his salt, and you by now are worth a small salt mine, has heard the tales. Mermaids, sea serpents, ghost ships, islands that aren't islands, and birds that scream out the names of men long lost. Mermaids are the favorite, of course. They sing to you, says Wilkin, from behind a barrel where he's avoiding knot duty. Voices like angels. Then they pull you under and tickle you to death. Bartram snorts. Oh, they drown you, boy. Wilkin shrugs. Same thing if you're laughing hard enough. You've never seen a mermaid yourself, but you've seen men see them, which is almost as good. Once, during a calm so still, it made the ship feel dead, Oswin leapt to his feet and pointed into the water, shouting something about golden hair and singing. Turned out to be a seal, a very round seal, with a fish in its mouth. It was not impressed by Oswin's attempt at courtship. Still, the story lives on. According to Oswin, it winked at him. Then there are the sea cows. Not cows exactly. Manatees. Gentle, slow, rotund creatures that float like soggy pillows and blink like they've just been woken from a very long nap. You saw one once back near the coast of Africa. It burped a bubble and disappeared. That didn't stop old Hal from claiming he once dated one. She wore a kelp bracelet, he insists. Had a tail like velvet. You nod again. It's easier than disagreeing. The thing is, no one actually believes these tales, at least not entirely. But belief isn't the point. The point is to pass the time, to make sense of the endless blue, to fill the silence between creaking planks and moaning sails. Stories are like biscuits, on long voyages tough dry, and better than nothing. Even you've told a few. There was the time you swore a crab followed you from ship to ship, a clever one, always just out of reach. You gave it a name, Lord Pinchworth, and described his monocle in great detail. You meant it as a joke. Somehow, by the end of the week, half the crew was leaving offerings of bread crusts near the stern just in case. Superstition spreads faster than scurvy. The first mate once banned talking about sea monsters during night watch after Wilkin nearly leapt overboard, swearing he'd seen a kraken with glowing eyes and a taste for ankles. Later, he admitted it was probably the moon reflecting off a barrel. But the damage was done. No one went near the barrels for a week. You glance at the water, now eyes scanning the swells for anything out of place. You're not looking for mermaids, of course, just being thorough. The sea is a strange place. It plays tricks. You've seen shadows where there were none, heard voices in the wind, smelled bread where only salt should be. Once you and Bartram both saw a ship sailing upside down. In the sky turned out to be a mirage, but for a full hour you were both ready to hail it. The cook claims to have once caught a fish that whispered its name. He served it with turnips. It was not a good meal. Some men scoff. They say only fools believe in such things. But those same men still refuse to whistle on deck, summons the wind, they say, or tap the bell without reason. And everyone, without exception, throws a bit of bread overboard on the first sighting of dolphins, just in case. There's comfort in the stories. They're familiar, repeated, passed down with tweaks and flourishes. They give shape to the endless, names to the nameless. They remind you that while the sea may be vast and hungry, you are not alone, not really. Besides, anything's possible when you haven't seen land in 12 days and the biscuits have gone soft in the middle. You lean back, letting the sway of the ship do most of the balancing. The clouds have scattered into sheep shapes. The water glimmers. Somewhere off port, a fish jumps, as if for dramatic effect. See that Hal whispers? You nod, even though you saw nothing. Mermaid, he says. You don't believe him, but you smile anyway. The cook aboard a ship like this is not so much a man as he is a permanent fixture, like the mast, the anchor, or that strange stain near the aft stairs no one will admit to making. His name is Crib, though some say it's short for something unspeakable. Others suspect he named himself after a particularly sturdy barrel. No one knows for sure, and no one's brave enough to ask. Crib rules the galley with a ladle in one hand and a permanent scowl in the other. His eyebrows are thick, his apron thicker, and his patience virtually non-existent. He smells faintly of onion-burnt flour and simmering resentment, and he does not like you, not you in particular, just sailors in general. He claims you're too picky, that you wouldn't know good stew if it kissed you on the lips, that you complain too much about the flavor when really you should be thanking him for the calories. To be fair, the man is under impossible conditions. He's working in a swaying closet, no larger than a horse's stall, with a fire that refuses to stay lit, and ingredients that expired before the ship even left port. You try making 3 meals a day out of salt pork wormy flour and something labeled only as dried vegetable matter. Still, one might argue that seasoning wouldn't kill him. Today's lunch begins as it always does with the scent of despair. A thick, steamy aroma wafts up from below decks, curling around your nose like a rude suggestion. The word goes round stew again. You sigh. Stew is the default. Stew is inevitable. Sometimes it's called soup, sometimes it's called porridge, but it's always stew in the end. A grayish slurry containing at least one vegetable guessing, which is a popular mealtime game, and one meat of uncertain origin. You line up behind the others, tin bowl in hand, as Crib ladles out the slop with a gesture that could be described as vindictive. He never makes eye contact. He just plops and grunts. Plop, grunt, plop, grunt. When it's your turn, you smile politely. Smells rich, today you lie. Crib raises one eyebrow so high it nearly sails away. Eat fast. It bites back. You take your bowl and retreat to a crate near the mainmast. You've eaten in worse places. At least here, if the stew revolts mid-meal, you can discreetly toss it overboard without anyone noticing. Well, except the gulls who always notice. Wilkin joins you. He sniffs his bowl like it might explode. Is it sweet? You sniff yours? No. He frowns. Mine's sweet. You both stare at his bowl for a moment. Then you stare at each other. Neither of you eats for a bit. Eventually, hunger wins. You dip your spoon and raise a tentative mouthful. The texture is ambitious, chewy in places, soupy in others, and punctuated by the occasional surprise crunch. You chew with grim dignity. You swallow with effort. You consider asking the captain if you're allowed to fast for religious reasons. Someone yells from across the deck, "What's this chewy bit?" Crib's voice floats up from the galley flavor. You sigh and keep chewing. To make things worse, Crib plays favorites. The officers get nicer food, not good food, mind you, just slightly less ominous. Once you caught a glimpse of a slice of dried apple on the first mate's plate. A full slice, with edges. The memory haunts you still. One sailor, years ago, tried to sneak into the officer's mess and steal a biscuit. He was caught. Crib didn't say a word, just served him stew with 3 times the usual amount of chewy bits for a week straight. The man cried on day 4. You suspect the chewy bits are made of rope. Bartram has a theory that Crib used to be a real chef, proper hat sauces, silver spoons the works before something happened. A scandal, a duel, a pastry gone horribly wrong. Whatever it was, he ended up here feeding sailors instead of nobles, and he's been punishing the world for it ever since. Mark my words, Bartram once said, slurping from a chipped bowl. That man has cooked for kings, and now he cooks for us. We are his penance. The galley itself is a cave of culinary despair. You've only glimpsed inside once or twice enough to see bubbling pots, hanging nets of dubious roots, and shelves that creak under the weight of old tins and older secrets. There is a spice rack, technically. It contains 2 jars, one empty, the other full of dried mustard seeds no one dares touch. Still, for all the grumbling, you keep coming back. You have to. Crib is the keeper of the only hot food on the ship. He controls the stew, the biscuits, the occasional lump of molasses, and like it or not, your stomach doesn't care about flavor. It cares about not being empty. So you finish your bowl, you scrape the sides, you lick the spoon, you sigh and wonder what the chewy bit was. Probably better not to know. After lunch, you rinse your bowl in the shared barrel, trying not to think too hard about the bits floating on top. You nod respectfully at Crib as you pass. He does not return it. He simply ladles out the next portion with the weary fury of a man who once dreamed of soufflés. Back on deck, the wind picks up. The sails flap. Someone burps loudly. Wilkins stares at his half-finished stew and says, "You think he means for it to taste like that?" You shrug. "I think he means for us to survive." You pause. "And possibly suffer?" He nods. The stew settles in your stomach like a soft stone. You lean back, watching the clouds, trying to decide if you're full or just afraid to eat more. Either way, lunch is over. The cook has won this round, as he always does. Every voyage has that one crate. You know the kind. No one remembers loading it. No one remembers signing off on it. But there it is, nestled snugly in the hold, wedged between two barrels of pickled onions and a mysterious bag of unlabeled powder. At first it just sat there, quiet, innocent, heavy, yes, damp, certainly. But that's not unusual at sea. Everything down there is damp, including the bread, including the men, including, for reasons unknown, the ink in the captain's logbook. The crate wasn't even opened for the first 2 weeks of the journey. There were more pressing concerns, storms, rations, Wilkin getting his hand stuck in the lantern holder again. So the crate simply loitered, oozing a bit of brine and smelling faintly of old music and eel. Then one night someone heard it, a sound, faint, eerie, like humming, a long droning tone that echoed just slightly in the planks of the hold. Not a wind, not a rat, not even the groan of tired timber. This was melodic. Wilkin was the first to report it naturally. "There's something singing down there," he whispered at breakfast, eyes wide and hair even wilder than usual. "No, there's not," Bartram replied without looking up. Wilkin insisted. "It sounded like a choir, if the choir were underwater and lonely." That description was vague enough to make everyone deeply uncomfortable. Curiosity being what it is, and boredom being what it always is, 3 men went below after lunch to investigate. You were one of them. The others were Oswin and Hal, armed with a lantern and a leftover biscuit for protection. Hal said eels respected baked goods. You didn't argue. Sure enough, the closer you got to the crate, the clearer it became a humming, gentle, oddly mournful, like a lullaby hummed by something with gills. You stood around it for a while, debating what to do. No one wanted to touch it, obviously. That would be foolish. Oswin suggested pouring hot tea on it to see if it reacts. Hal just sniffed it. Eventually, you did what any sensible sailor would. You opened it, very slowly, while standing as far back as humanly possible. The lid creaked. A small plume of fish-scented steam wafted out. Inside, coiled like wet rope, on market day were eels, dozens of them, shiny, slick, wriggling lazily in a bed of wet moss and kelp, and humming. Yes, humming. You stared. They stared back. One of them, you swear on your own teeth, blinked in time with the melody. You closed the lid. After a lengthy silence, Oswin declared, "Those are not regular eels." Hal nodded solemnly. "They're gifted." You all left the hold and agreed never to mention it to the captain. But word spreads. Within a day, the entire crew knew. By day 2, the eels had a schedule: midday humming, evening lullaby, occasional impromptu solos. By day 3, someone named them. Not individually, of course. That would be mad. But collectively, they were now the choir. Bartram naturally dismissed the whole thing as mass hysteria, until one morning he woke up humming their tune. He hasn't spoken of it since. The eels didn't seem dangerous. They didn't bite. They didn't try to escape. They just existed, vibing, slippery, and soulful. The ship changed subtly in their presence. Men started working to rhythm. Tasks went smoother. Tempers softened. Even Crib began stirring the stew in time with the eel song. One night, someone even danced. Alone, yes, but with conviction. A debate broke out over what to do with them. Should we set them free? Wilkin asked, eyes watery. They were never not free, Oswin replied cryptically. Some men wanted to keep them, train them, perhaps book a tavern tour once ashore. Others said they were a sign, a bad omen, that sea creatures shouldn't make music, and certainly not in harmony. The captain never addressed the matter. He just frowned slightly more than usual and locked his cabin door a bit earlier at night. Eventually, the choir stopped humming, just like that. One morning's silence. You opened the crate to check. The eels were gone. No slime trail, no broken wood, no splinters. Just a coil of dry kelp shaped vaguely like a treble clef and a strange sense of loss. Wilkin wept openly. Hal claimed it was a blessing. Oswin said, I think they returned to the deep to finish their album. You suspected they simply slithered out during the night and flung themselves overboard. But it was more pleasant to imagine they had somewhere important to be. A kelp concert, a shellfish soiree. Their departure left a quiet ache. For days afterward, men hummed absent-mindedly. Tasks took longer. Crib burned the stew 3 times. You caught Bartram tapping his fingers on the railing, searching for a beat that no longer came. Even now, weeks later, when the ship is still and the sky turns gray, you sometimes hear it. A low vibration in the wood, a ripple in the air, a whisper of melody that tickles your ear just enough to make you turn your head, and you smile, because for one strange week, this ship belonged to something beautiful, something mysterious, and vaguely aquatic. The crate still sits in the hold, empty, waiting. There's a special kind of heat that settles over a ship around midday. It's not the friendly warmth you might find in a sunny meadow or beside a fireplace. No, this is deck heat, salt-saturated, sweat-drenched, and entirely unsupervised by mercy. By noon, the sails hang slack and lazy. The tar between the planks softens just enough to stick to your boots, and the gulls above have stopped squawking, not out of peace, but because even they can't be bothered. And so the crew does what it does best. During times like these, they complain. Not just regular complaining. This is shirtless, theatrical, full-body griping. The kind that takes real commitment. You shed your wool shirt, not because it makes the heat more bearable, nothing could, but because you want the sun to know you're not afraid of it. Also because everyone else is doing it, and the peer pressure among half-scorched men is surprisingly strong. Around you, a symphony of belly-scratching begins. Bartram stands near the foremast chest, like a slab of salted beef arms crossed, muttering to no one in particular. This isn't heat. This is punishment. Oswin wipes his brow with what appears to be a sock. Air's too thick, he announces. Feels like breathing stew. Wilkin, ever dramatic, sprawls across a coil of rope like a fainting duchess and whispers, Tell my mother I died sticky. The deck shimmers slightly. Someone tries walking barefoot and immediately regrets it. The planks are hotter than Crib's stew pot on a vengeance spree. You hop from foot to foot like an angry heron until your boots are back on. There's no breeze, not even the teasing sort. Just a great glowering dome of sunlight overhead and the occasional creak of the ship adjusting its joints. The sails dangle like tired flags. The only thing moving is a single, slow wheeling gull circling like it knows something you don't. Tasks continue in theory. Ropes are nudged. Buckets are glanced at. One man pokes a knot with a stick and declares it secure enough. It's the kind of work best described as symbolic. You try to swab a patch of deck, but the water evaporates before the brush touches wood. You briefly consider just making swabbing sounds with your mouth to keep up appearances. Scrub, scrub, scritch, scritch. Crib appears briefly on deck, squinting at the sun as though it's a rival chef who just stole his spice rack. He mutters something about too hot for soup and disappears again, likely to stew in his own stew. Someone drapes a spare sail over the rail to make a patch of shade. Within minutes, 6 men are crammed under it, like sardines. Old Hal claims it's a shade rotation station. He sets a 10-minute timer using a potato and his shadow. It is not accurate. Sweat drips from your brow. Your skin smells like salt sun and mild regret. You scratch at a mosquito bite that's been with you since Gibraltar. It has, at this point, achieved a level of permanence that borders on friendship. Above the sky is an unbroken canvas of blue. No clouds, no birds, just the sun gazing down like an annoyed lighthouse keeper. You wonder briefly if it's judging you. Then you realize you don't care. You're too warm to feel shame. You hear a splash. Everyone turns. Just Wilkin again. He's poured half a bucket of water over his head and now stands triumphantly like a shipwrecked statue. I regret nothing, he declares. The rest of the crew eyes him with envy. One by one, men begin adopting his method, awkward half-hearted washes, using buckets meant for swabbing or fish, or on one disturbing occasion both. The result is a soaking, squelching, shirtless collection of half-drowned men who look more like misbehaving statues than sailors. Someone starts singing. Not well. A low, off-key ditty about fried clams and lost love. Others join in, not because it's a good song, but because singing means less thinking, less heat. The chorus goes, "Oh, the sun burns my back, and it boils my toes. My sweat's in my stew, and my boots won't close." You forget the rest. It doesn't matter. The rhythm helps. The tune rises like steam drifting off into the vast, uncaring blue. After a while, you lean against a barrel that's only moderately splintery and let your limbs go loose. There's nothing urgent to do. Not now. Not when everything's slow and glistening. You scratch your chest absent-mindedly and glance around. Shirtless backs, sun-pink shoulders, men lying on sacks like limp fish. One sailor appears to be napping with his eyes open. You don't question it. This is the quiet part of the voyage. The hot, breathy lull where tempers droop and thoughts drift. You think about bread again. Maybe a slice of melon, a cool well, and a breeze that smells of mint and distant pine. You think about home, not in any sentimental way, just enough to remember that it existed once and that it had shade. Then a sound, a creak, it's a flutter, a breeze. Small, uncertain, but real. You stand, the others stir. Sails tremble like leaves. You whisper wind. Old Hal sniffs the air like a dog. Tiny wind, he confirms. A cheer rises soft, tired, but sincere. And so slowly, the ship begins to stir again. Buckets lifted, ropes gathered, shirts considered but not worn. You breathe deep, the wind touching your face, like a kiss from a shy ghost. Maybe the sun has lost interest. Maybe the ship, like its crew, has decided it's done pretending to work. Either way, you smile, because even in the heat, under the gripes and grumbles, this is life. This is sailing. This is how you survive, by sweating, singing, swearing, and stealing shade whenever you can. There is an art form aboard a medieval ship more subtle than navigation, more sacred than cooking, and more widely practiced than knot tying. It is the art of doing nothing loudly. Now doing nothing quietly is easy. Any fool can nap in a corner and hope not to be noticed. But doing nothing loudly, proudly, and with just enough dramatic flair to suggest you're in the throes of vital labor that takes talent. And on this ship, you dear sailor, are a master. It begins with tools. The best loud doing nothing jobs involve at least one tool that clinks. A hammer is ideal. A mallet will do. A piece of rope looped around your wrist in a vaguely purposeful way adds authenticity. You tuck a rusty nail behind your ear for effect. You select your task inspecting deck boards, a job that sounds impressive, but is in truth just stomping around and squinting thoughtfully at the floor. You stomp. You pause. You squint. You nod. Then you shift slightly to the left and repeat. Occasionally you kneel and tap a plank with your hammer. Tonk tonk. You frown as if you've heard something meaningful. Then you stand lean on your hammer and sigh. The sigh is important. It must be deep, weary. The kind of sigh that says this ship would crumble without me. Nearby, Bartram is engaged in his own act of loud nothing. He's wrapping a coil of rope again. The same rope he's been coiling for the past 3 hours. It's already coiled. He knows it. You know it. The rope knows it. But he gives each loop a theatrical tug, mutters, and occasionally steps back to admire his handiwork like a gallery artist with a very abstract painting. Wilkin is tightening a bolt that hasn't moved since the ship was built. He grunts with every turn. It's a performance, a slow, sweaty ballet of torque and bluff. Old Hal walks past, dragging a bucket of seawater. Where's he going? No one asks. He's been walking back and forth for half an hour now. Sometimes the bucket has water in it. Sometimes it doesn't. That's the mystery. That's the commitment. You glance up toward the quarterdeck. The first mate is watching. Just briefly. You shift positions, crouch over a rope, and mutter numbers under your breath. 3/7, lash point 12. The mate nods, satisfied that you're busy. You don't even know what you just said. That's the trick. Make noise look concerned and never sit still too long. Crib appears from the galley, scowling into a spoon. You immediately begin hammering again. Tonk, tonk, tonk. Crib grunts. You hammer harder. He grunts louder. You pause just long enough to look at the spoon nod respectfully and resume your tonking. There's a rhythm to this life, a flow. Sweat, stomp, sigh, tap, frown, Repeat. You lean against a post brush, imaginary dust from your hands, and say something vague like, "That'll hold for now," but she's wanting to shift near the stern. No one knows what you mean. You don't know what you mean. But someone nearby nods in agreement and adds, Stern's always shifty in this weather." You've created consensus from vapor. You are a legend. Of course, there are risks. Every now and then, someone actually assigns you a task, something real, something that involves lifting or crawling or, heaven forbid, measuring. The key is to look just busy enough that they assign it to someone else. You spot the bosun approaching and immediately squat down beside a coil of line, pulling it through your fingers like you're untangling a sailor's lost soul. He glances at you, sees the intensity on your brow, and moves on. You straighten slowly, stretch your back, and say to no one, "There's always more knots hiding where you least expect." A nearby sailor grunts in agreement. "Too true," he says. He's holding a mop that hasn't touched the deck in 15 minutes. Sometimes you add dialogue. "Strange warp in the grain here," you mutter. "Might be the humidity." Then you poke the wood with your finger and purse your lips like a carpenter faced with a difficult philosophical question. On land, this kind of behavior might get you fired. Out here, it gets you respected, or at least it gets you left alone, which is even better. There's camaraderie in the craft. A nod from Bartram, a shared wink from Wilkin as he very slowly polishes a pulley that hasn't spun since last harvest. Everyone understands the rules. Everyone knows the game. Doing nothing loudly is about presence, noise, motion, gravitas. You pass Oswin, who's holding a piece of sailcloth up to the sun like he's appraising a priceless painting. You pause. He turns to you and says very seriously, "This corner's haunted." You nod. "Burn it." He does. The first mate wanders by again. You immediately stand straighter, wipe your brow, and say, "That line's holding for now, but I'll need a second pair of hands if she shifts again." He grunts. Good." You don't know which line he thinks you meant, and he doesn't ask. Success. As the sun begins its slow descent, the crew begins to slow even further, if that's possible. Movements become theatrical. Yawns are amplified. Every simple task requires at least 3 men and a philosophical debate. But beneath all the play acting, there's a kind of peace. The world is quiet. The ship creaks like an old rocking chair. The sea whispers. Your hammer rests in your hand. You know full well you haven't fixed anything. Not really. But you've made your presence felt. You've earned your biscuit. And when the bell rings for the next shift, you rise with a slow, purposeful sigh, the kind only true craftsmen of the idle arts can produce. There are things you don't say out loud at sea. You don't ask how far it is to land. You don't mention the smell of home. You certainly don't say you're afraid. But sometimes you write it. Not to send it, of course. That would be far too practical. The letter isn't meant to be delivered. It's meant to be written. To get the ache out of your chest and into a piece of paper that will one day float in the ocean like a ghost with postage. Your paper is rough, curled at the edges from damp air stained faintly with oil, or maybe stew. The ink is homemade, or home improvised, at least thick and slow, a blend of ash vinegar and whatever old Hal claims was a squid, probably. You settle on your bunk with the ship swaying gently, and begin with the old familiar opener, "Dear whoever finds this." Some men write to loved ones. You write to strangers. There's something freeing about it. A blank face, an invisible ear, no judgment, no expectation, just paper ink and the sound of waves tapping gently against the hull. You pause often, not for lack of words, but because the words arrive too quickly, tripping over each other in your chest. You write about the heat, the biscuits, the eels. You describe the color of the sea at dawn's grayish blue, like old bruises healing. You talk about the stars, how they look brighter out here, lonelier but braver. You describe Bartram's snoring, Wilkins' humming, Cribb's terrible stew, and the way the captain's hat flaps like it's judging you. You mention that your beard smells like fish more often than not, and you've made peace with it. You write because there's a part of you that wants to be remembered not as a hero, not as a name carved into marble, but just as a man who sailed once and saw things and felt things and missed things. You miss land, of course, but you don't write it like that. You say, "I dreamt of bread again last night. Crusty, hot. It smelled like answers." You fold the letter carefully. You slip it into a bottle. Not a fresh one, those are for drinking. This is an old green bottle with a chipped neck and a crooked cork. You roll the letter, shove it in, and press the cork in place. Now comes the part where most men hesitate, to toss or not to toss. Bartram Ever the Cynic once said, "No one finds bottles. They sink, they break, they become fish homes." Wilkin claims he once got a reply. 12 years later, he says, from a goat farmer in Sicily, "Oswin throws a bottle every Sunday religiously. My legacy," he says, though no one's sure if he's serious or just really enjoys throwing things off ships. You stand at the stern, bottle in hand. The sea rolls beneath you like a living creature half asleep. The wind is gentle. The gulls have moved on. It's just you, your bottle, and the invisible thread of hope that someone somewhere might one day read your words and say, "Ah, so that's what it was like." You throw it, not hard, just enough. The bottle arcs through the air, glinting in the fading light, then splashes with a soft plunk and begins to drift. You watch it bob for a while, caught in the ship's wake, then slowly slip away, dancing on the ripples like a message in a dream. There's a kind of quiet joy in it, not because it will be found, but because it could. You head back toward the main deck, passing Wilkin, who is carving something into the mast with a spoon. "Another letter?" he asks. You nod. "Say anything good." You think. "Said I was tired, but all right." He grins. "Best kind of honest that." You pause, then add, "Told them about the singing eels." "Of course you did." That night, after the bell has rung and the stars are sharpening against the black sky, you lie awake in your bunk arms, behind your head, listening to the creak of ropes and the hush of wind. Somewhere out there, a small green bottle is drifting across the vastness. It might reach ashore. It might be smashed against rocks. It might sink slowly to the sea floor and become a coral-covered curiosity. But it exists. It carries your voice, and for now that's enough. It always starts the same way. A squint, then a pause, then someone says it. What's that out there? No phrase aboard a ship inspires such excitement, such chaos, such frenzied speculation as those 5 words. It doesn't matter how many false alarms have come before or how ridiculous the last sighting was. The mere possibility of a thing anything on the horizon sends the crew into a frenzy of wild guesses and escalating nonsense. Today's squinting comes courtesy of Bartram. He's at the starboard rail, one hand shielding his eyes, the other pointing vaguely toward a distant speck bobbing on the waves. Could be a ship, he grunts. Wilkin appears at his side, eyes wide. A pirate ship. Bartram grunts again, which Wilkin chooses to interpret as definitely. Oswin joins them, blinking hard. I think it's moving. Now the whisper spreads across the deck like spilled lamp oil. Sail ho. It's a merchantman. No, it's flying black. No, wait, I think it's furry. You, being a man of experience and steady nerves, walk over calmly and peer out across the water. What you see is, well, it's definitely something. A shape, bobbing, drifting, unbothered by the waves. It's small, brownish, lumpy, suspiciously still. Canoe, someone suggests. Dead whale, says another. Sea cow with a hat, mutters old Hal, not even looking up. The captain, of course, says nothing. He merely glances in that general direction with narrowed eyes, then returns to his mysterious maps and his even more mysterious tea. The first mate lifts a spyglass. You all wait. This is the moment. The truth tube shall reveal all. He lowers the glass. Could be a goat, he says. Silence. A what, says Wilkin. Goat, the first mate repeats. Floating on a barrel or a raft. Possibly dead. Possibly napping. More silence. Oswin scratches his head. Goats don't float, do they? You're not sure, but no one's willing to argue. The goat theory gains traction instantly. Well, that explains the smell, says one. Brave goat, says another. Probably escaped from a pirate petting zoo, says Wilkin, who you suspect has never actually seen a goat. Within 10 minutes, the entire ship has accepted that there is in fact a goat alive, napping and seafaring somewhere out there beyond the wake. Someone suggests launching a boat to retrieve it. Someone else starts humming a sea shanty about Captain Billy and the goat that got away. Crib mutters that if it's edible, it had better not be wasted. Meanwhile, the object goat or otherwise drifts out of view, swallowed up by the horizon and the half-mad imaginings of the crew. This is not the first time. Last week you spent half an hour convinced a cloud was a Spanish galleon. It had sails, it had a shape, and it definitely moved until it rained on you. 3 days ago, a floating crate sparked a heated debate about smuggling treasure and whether you'd all be rich by supper. You sent out a dinghy. It was full of turnips. Last month, a shoal of jumping fish was briefly identified as a sea dragon feeding its young. Oswin wrote a poem. It was not well received. But the greatest, most baffling misidentification of all happened 2 years ago. A black shape low in the water, swift, silent. It followed the ship for 3 days. No one knew what it was. Tension was high. Weapons were readied. The crew barely slept. It turned out to be your own ship's shadow. Since then, you've learned to take it all in stride. You return to your post as the others continue their goat-based speculation. Someone is sketching it. Someone else is composing a limerick. You meanwhile stare out at the water and try to imagine what's really out there. A dolphin, a barrel, a raft full of hats, maybe all of them, maybe none, because in truth the sea hides as much as it shows. It plays tricks with light and shape and tired sailor eyes. And in those long hours between islands, between ports, between anything happening at all, it becomes a mirror for your own imagination. Sometimes what you see is real, sometimes it's a goat, and sometimes, just sometimes, it doesn't matter. Because for those few moments, everyone's awake, eyes wide, voices raised, hearts lightened by the possibility of something new. That's the real gift, not the discovery, but the imagining. And so you smile, you lean against the rail, and as the sky turns orange with the approach of evening, you whisper to yourself, "Safe travels, seafaring goat." There are few things more unsettling to a sailor than silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, not the hush of midnight or the stillness after a storm. No, this is the silence of a dead calm when the wind forgets it has a job and the sea becomes as flat and still as a polished mirror, reflecting your face back at you with more honesty than anyone asked for. You feel it before you see it. The sails stop flapping. The ropes fall slack. The usual groan of timbers goes quiet, and the gulls gone. Even the gulls don't bother with calm seas. There's nothing to steal, no chaos to exploit, no crusts to dive bomb. The ship ceases to be a ship. It becomes a floating thought, adrift, adrift, adrift. And so does the crew. Feels wrong, Oswin mutters, peering over the side like the sea might suddenly confess to something. Bartram, shirt off, squinting at the horizon, grumbles. It's too quiet. It's planning something. You lean on the rail and stare at the still water. No waves, no wind, no purpose. The ship rocks so slightly it feels like breathing shallow, uncertain, half asleep. Wilkin attempts to fill the silence with a tune, a shaky little ditty about cabbage and heartbreak. It does not help. The thing about dead calm is that there's nothing to do. And when sailors have nothing to do, their minds turn inward and their mouths turn outward. First comes the grumbling. Why are we headed this way anyway? Feels like we're being followed by boredom itself. Anyone seen crib lately? Haven't smelled onions in hours. Then come the accusations. You knocked the luck out of the wind when you whistled. Wilkin, I wasn't whistling. I was breathing with flair, same thing. Someone blames the captain. Someone else blames the moon. Someone starts blaming that weird crate we opened last week. You try to point out that it's been gone for days. You are ignored. Eventually, the boredom begins to ferment. Oswin attempts to juggle cannonballs. It ends poorly. Wilkin challenges Bartram to a staring contest. It ends very poorly. Old Hal begins trying to talk to the sea. Not about the sea. To it. He stands at the rail arms crossed, muttering in what he calls the old sailor dialect. Oi, wave belly, move your watery self along. You try not to make eye contact. The ship, ever helpful, joins in the madness. Without the wind guiding her, she begins to spin ever so slowly. Not dramatically, just enough to make the compass nervous and the men suspicious. You try to take a nap. It's too hot. You try to read your own handwriting from yesterday's log. It makes less sense than usual. You consider writing a poem. You don't. By mid-afternoon, the tension reaches its peak. The crew is no longer working. They're loitering like dockside pigeons with nowhere to peck. You hear the word mutiny whispered. Not seriously, not yet, but it's in the air, floating beside the heat and the smell of feet. Someone picks a fight with a bucket. Someone else blames the bucket. Then Wilkin, in a moment of brilliant idiocy, walks to the bow and shouts into the sea, "Bring us wind, you lazy ocean tubs." Everyone freezes. You glare at him. Did you just insult the ocean? He shrugs. It's ignoring us. Bartram, to his credit, begins whispering apologies to the water. Crib throws a spoon at Wilkin. It misses, but the intent is clear. You all wait, tense, listening. But the ocean remains impassive, silent, patient. The sun leans lower in the sky. The sweat beads and rolls. The sails sag like old laundry. The mood droops like a wet rope. Then, a breeze. Just a flicker, a nudge, the barest suggestion of movement. You all turn slowly, as if afraid it might spook. The sails twitch. Another breeze. Someone gasps, and then gloriously a gust. The sails catch. The rigging hums. The ship shudders, then creaks to life like an old man remembering how to dance. A cheer goes up, not loud but heartfelt. Men smile, shoulders relax. The ship begins to move, gliding once more, like she knows where she's going, even if none of you do. The first mate appears, arms crossed. "See," he says. "Told you it would pass." No one remembers him saying that. You glance at Wilkin. He's still standing at the bow, arms raised like he personally summoned the breeze. You say, "You know you didn't do that." He grins. "But what if I did?" You roll your eyes and go back to your rope duties, real this time, not theatrical. The wind is here, the calm is broken, the madness recedes. But as you work, you glance once more at the still sea behind you, and you remember how quickly a sailor can become unmoored without motion. There's nothing quite as maddening as stillness, nothing quite as blessed as movement, and nothing quite as dangerous as a bored sailor with ideas. There are many tasks aboard a ship that sound noble. Hauling sails, climbing the rigging, navigating by stars, manning the helm in a storm. And then there's swabbing the deck, the glorious, soul-stirring act of pushing dirty seawater across a surface already mostly water, mostly salt, and definitely already filthy again before you're finished. It's not heroic. It's not exciting. But it is daily, and today it's your turn. You're handed a mop that looks like it was once part of a scarecrow. The handle splinters. The bristles are stiff in some parts, floppy in others. It smells faintly of cod and resentment. The bucket is filled with seawater and something Crib swore was cleaning vinegar. You don't ask questions. You begin in the traditional manner by sighing loudly. Bartram, mopping nearby, echoes your sigh with one of his own. This is part of the ritual. You must acknowledge that this work is beneath all of you, and yet somehow no one is allowed to stop doing it. Wilkin is assigned to dry follow, which means trailing behind you with a rag and pretending to dry what never truly gets wet. He whistles off-key and steps in the water you just pushed away, undoing 15 seconds of your finest work. You say nothing. That too is part of the ritual. Swabbing involves a delicate balance of pressure rhythm and not falling over. The deck pitches gently just enough to make every pass with the mop feel like a waltz performed by a man with 2 left boots. You sway. You press. You scrape at something that might be tar or jam. You hope for tar. Wasn't this cleaned yesterday, you ask? No, says Oswin from across the deck. Yesterday we just talked about cleaning it. Ah, you say. That explains the jam. Every few minutes, someone new walks by and offers supervision. You missed a spot there, says the first mate, pointing vaguely at a patch of dry plank. That line's crooked, mutters old Hal, whose last encounter with straight lines ended in the 13th century. Even Crib pokes his head out and says, "Don't slosh near the galley. I just swept." You resist the urge to throw your mop like a harpoon. The truth is, swabbing is never truly done. The sea undoes your work the moment you turn your back. The wind flings salt in your eyes. Someone drops a biscuit. Someone else steps in stew. A seagull performs an aerial insult. You scrub. You mutter. You scrub again. The argument begins as it always does. Bartram, I've done twice your area. You moved your bucket twice. That's not the same thing. Wilkin, I've been drying both your spots. Spiritually, Oswin, having swabbed half the stern and then wandered off to write poetry on a crate, reappears just in time to say, are we not all just mopping our way through life? No one answers him. The mop handle blisters your palms. Your shoulders ache. Your lower back is holding a quiet, grudge-filled meeting. And yet, you keep swabbing, because this is what sailors do when there's no sail to haul or storm to shout at. They mop. You try to find meaning in it, the rhythm, the slow progress, the gentle scrape of bristle against board. You imagine monks swabbing their abbey floors in quiet contemplation. You do not imagine them being yelled at by their abbots for leaving water under the bread bin. Wilkin begins singing, swabbing through the morning, swabbing through the night. My bucket is my compass, my mops, my guiding light. Bartram tells him to stop. Wilkin swabs harder defiantly. You pause to stretch your back and notice something squirming in your bucket. A crab, probably, or a curse made solid. Either way, you decide not to put your hands in again. Eventually, someone declares the deck passably clean. No one agrees, but everyone accepts it. That's the real tradition. You wring out your mop, hang it to dry, and return the bucket to its hook, even though it never truly dries and never truly hangs straight. Wilkin gives his rag a ceremonious fold and bows to no one in particular. Bartram mutters, "Same time tomorrow." You nod. There's a strange pride in it all. You haven't moved the world, but you've kept it from getting stickier. You've participated in a long, slow, salty ballet passed down from sailor to sailor for generations. And the next time the deck creaks under your boots, it will creak cleaner. Even if only for an hour. Even if only you notice. Twilight is when the stories come out. When the deck is drying from the last half-hearted swabbing. When the bell has rung and the sun sinks low enough to make shadows long and suspicious, that's when the crew starts to gather in loose circles by a coil of rope or near the galley hatch or perched on barrels that may or may not be haunted. No one ever says, "Let's tell stories." They just happen, like storms or rats. Tonight's tale begins as so many do with Oswin. He's balanced cross-legged on a crate hands, steepled voice low. Ever heard of the floating nun? You roll your eyes, but quietly. Bartram groans. Wilkin clutches his rag like it might protect him. Old Hal, seated nearby, simply spits over the rail and mutters, "Here we go again." Oswin leans in theatrically. Long ago, he begins on a ship, not unlike this one, maybe even this one. There was a voyage doomed from the start. No wind, no fish. The stew curdled before it hit the pot. Then one morning, the lookout sees a figure on the horizon. You squint at the sea. It is as always vast and unhelpful. She was floating, Oswin continues, standing upright, in black robes, white cap, just gliding along the waves like a holy ice sculpture. A nun, Wilkin whispers. A nun, Oswin confirms. No boat, no raft, just her and the mist. You've heard this one before, several versions. Sometimes she sings, sometimes she screams. Once someone claimed she offered bread rolls. Oswin's version is the screaming kind. She followed them, he says, voice dropping to a whisper. Every night, closer, closer. No matter how far they sailed, she was always there, watching, floating. And then he claps. Suddenly the cook vanished. Wilkin jumps. Oswin smiles. All they found was his ladle, still warm. Bartram mutters, I'd follow Crib off the ship too, if I had to eat that stew one more day. Everyone chuckles, even Crib, who has appeared silently behind you, like a judgmental fog bank of his own snorts once and goes back below decks. But then someone says it. What about the barrel? Ah, yes, the barrel. Every ship has one, usually toward the aft, always slightly off-center. Marked with something chalk scratches a line of rope no one touches. Ours is squat, dark, damp. It hums when it's hot and gurgles when it's cold. No one knows what's inside. No one wants to. Legend says it's cursed, not loudly. Just in that way, people avoid looking directly at it or sitting near it. Once Wilkin tripped and landed with one arm draped over it. He didn't speak for 2 days, claimed it showed him things, refused to elaborate. Old Hal swears it groaned at him once. He hasn't walked near it since. You once saw the captain place a single clove of garlic on its lid. Then he walked away without a word. The garlic was gone the next morning. No trace, not even a smell. Someone, maybe Oswin, once theorized that it contains the soul of a shipwrecked opera singer. Another theory, it's just full of spoiled fish. Another, it is the nun. Whatever it is, the crew leaves it be. Tonight the wind is low. The sea is quiet. The stars are just beginning to blink into view, and someone's hung a lantern near the mizzenmast that flickers more than it should. It casts strange shapes. You glance toward the cursed barrel. There's a stain next to it that's been there for months. It's shaped like a hand. No one has tried to scrub it off. Bartram clears his throat. My uncle served on a ship with a cursed barrel once. Everyone leans in. Sailor tried to open it. Got halfway through the lid before he heard it whisper. What did it say? Wilkin asks. Bartram shrugs. Just his name. But it said it in his own voice. You all sit in silence for a moment. Then Oswin whispers, That's why we leave it alone. You nod. Quiet agreement. Because sailors believe in strange things, not because they want to, but because it's safer than the alternative. Easier to name the weird, the eerie, the shifting shadow. Easier to call it a nun or a barrel than to admit you just don't know. And when you don't know at sea, things go wrong. Someone lights a pipe. Someone else starts humming a lullaby off-key. You lean back, arms crossed, eyes fixed on nothing. The nuns and the barrel, the sea itself. You've seen a lot out here. Storms, sirens, ships that vanish over the edge of the world. But nothing's stranger than the things your own shipmates believe, and believe hard. The barrel stays where it is, unopened and undisturbed. And somewhere on the edge of sleep, You imagine a woman in black robes, drifting on the mist, holding a bowl of stew and muttering your name with a grin. You decide not to go below just yet. There is in the hold a bundle of old fishing nets that haven't touched a fish in years. Some say they were loaded aboard by mistake. Others claim they're left over from a time when this ship actually fished for a living back before it became a cargo hauler or a courier or a vessel of vague purpose that mostly carries salted things and extremely tired men. Regardless of their origin, the nets remain. And once every so often, usually when the weather's too calm and the officers too bored, someone will bellow time to mend the nets. You groan along with the rest of the crew, because everyone knows we don't use the nets. But heaven help you if they're not in perfect condition, just in case we ever decide to develop a sudden interest in seafood again. You drag them up to the deck. They're heavy damp and smell like the memory of a forgotten fish, possibly one that held a grudge. The nets unroll across the planks like defeated ghosts, tangled, frayed, and utterly uninterested in being mended. You sit cross-legged beside a bundle needle, in one hand, twine in the other. Your fingers already ache in anticipation. Wilkins sits beside you holding his net like a dying pet. I don't know how to mend, he says. You don't need to, you reply. Just poke loop and look serious. Bartram, ever the purist, is already halfway through a row of tight, neat stitches, muttering technique matters, even in fiction. He's the kind of man who organizes his tools by moon phase. You love him and hate him in equal measure. Old Hal has simply taken to tying large, artistic knots in his net. If the fish don't like it, they can file a complaint, he says. You begin the process. Stitch, pull, seize, repeat. The twine snags on your nail. The net coils on itself. You find 3 new holes for every one you fix. Some holes are too small to matter. Others are so big they could legally qualify as exits. You squint at them, mutter something nautical, and stitch on through. Crib walks by, pausing just long enough to scoff. Those nets'll fall apart in a sneeze. You look up. We don't sneeze in them. He snorts and moves on. Every now and then, someone asks the question, why do we even have these nets? The answers vary. Tradition, inventory. The captain likes the way they smell to impress passing dolphins, because if we throw them away, the sea takes offense. No one truly knows. But like all good sailor traditions, it continues not because it makes sense, but because someone else decided it might once have mattered. And so the day stretches filled with soft curses and the whisper of twine through mesh. Someone sings under their breath, a tune about lost lobsters and the one that got away with the cook's wedding ring. You mend, you daydream, you tell yourself the net is your life, and each stitch is a wound you're finally repairing. Then you laugh at yourself and go back to pretending you're not tangling it further. Wilkins stabs himself with the needle. He looks betrayed. This net hates me. No, you say. It resents you. There's a difference. Eventually, someone decides that the mending has been sufficient. The nets are rolled up, looking slightly worse than before, but now held together by 100 new knots, most of which are decorative at best, malicious at worst. You carry them below deck again. They flop back into the corner where they always rest next to the spare sailcloth and the barrel that smells like vinegar and teeth, and there they will sit, untouched, unused, until the next stretch of boredom or overzealous officer reawakens the myth of their importance. But still, there's something comforting about the ritual, the shared sighs, the tangling, the poking of fingers and pride. You know these nets. They know you. You've bled into them, sworn at them, told them secrets when no one else would listen. And maybe just maybe that's what mending really is. Not fixing, just spending time with something broken and not expecting it to get better. You wipe your hands, scratch your beard, and stand slowly. Bartram holds up a freshly patched section. Wouldn't hold a fish. You nod. Good thing we're not trying to. Some battles at sea are dramatic. Man versus wave. Sailor versus storm. Wilkin versus common sense. But then there are the quieter, more persistent battles, the slow daily grudges between a man and something that refuses to yield. On this ship, that battle is between the bosun and the stain. You've seen it. Everyone has. It's on the starboard side of the main deck, just aft of the mast. Roundish, about the size of a soup bowl, faintly brownish red with hints of something darker near the edges. It doesn't look like much, but that's what makes it dangerous. It has been scrubbed. It has been soaked. It has been cursed at in 6 languages, and still it remains. The bosun, his name is Reed, but most just call him bosun, takes it personally, very personally. He's a gruff man built like a barrel in a bad mood, with forearms the size of small dogs and a voice like boiling gravel. He's been on this ship longer than the sails. He claims to have seen 2 captains retire and one spontaneously combust, though that story changes frequently. And for 8 years, he has been at war with the stain. Every morning before roll call, before coffee, before even the rats stir, Bosun Reed kneels beside the mark, with his brush a bucket and a look of pure, determined loathing. He scrubs, he mutters, he scrubs again. Once he tried sand, then vinegar, then a concoction involving lemon ash and what might have been rum. None of it worked. Someone suggested it was blood. That got the crew's attention. Whose blood, when why is it still there? Oswin insists it's cursed. You can't scrub out bad luck, he says. Only spread it. Wilkins says it's a burn. From lightning, he whispers. Straight from the sky. Bartram more practically claims it's just mold. A blot of sea rot in the grain, he says. Common, harmless, but no one really believes that, because mold doesn't resist. This stain defends itself. One afternoon, Bosun Reed brought out a chisel, 3 splinters, 1 bent blade, and a black eye self-inflicted. Later, the stain had not moved. If anything, it looked smug. The captain hat, impeccable, as always refuses to discuss it. When asked, he simply says, that matter is under control. Then he leaves the deck with suspicious haste. At this point, the stain has become a part of the ship's identity, a landmark, a warning. Sailors new to the crew are told solemnly, don't step on it, don't stare at it, don't ask about it. You once saw Wilkin attempt to mop over it. The mop stick snapped in 2. Reed appeared moments later, holding a brush like a weapon. Wilkin apologized to the floor. Even Cribb, who cares for nothing and no one, once tossed a bucket of stew near the stain and missed. The next day, all his biscuits came out black. He hasn't gone near it since, but every day Reed returns. He kneels. He wets the brush. He scrubs. He talks to it now under his breath, sometimes kindly, sometimes like he's trying to negotiate terms of surrender. You've heard him say things like, just a bit more now and you'll be free. You're holding on to nothing, you stubborn smear. One of us will die first, and it won't be me. One time he gave it a name, Marjorie. You never asked why. The stain has weathered storms, bird droppings a goat hoax, and the singing eels. It's seen birthdays and brawls, and the time old Hal tried to marry a barrel during a fog-induced fever. Through it all, it remains. At some point, you stopped rooting for the bosun and started rooting for the stain, not out of malice, just curiosity. You want to see how far this can go. Will it outlive him? Will it someday be passed down from bosun to bosun, like an heirloom or a curse? Some nights, you wonder if the stain is watching after all this ship creaks and breathes and hides her secrets. Why not this too? Why not one tiny mark that refuses to be erased? And so you watch Reed again as the sun dips and the shadows grow long, scrubbing, sweating, swearing softly. The rest of the deck gleams, but that one spot's still there, still proud, still Marjorie. You don't go to dinner on a medieval ship expecting delight. You go expecting calories, warmth if you're lucky, texture if you're truly blessed, flavor that's for landfolk and royalty. Out here, dinner is functional, a vague suggestion of food wrapped in steam and seasoned with suspicion. And tonight, Crib is on stew duty. Crib has many talents glaring, stomping, breathing loudly. Cooking is not on that list, but he's been galley-bound for so long no one remembers what life was like before his stews started appearing. Some say he used to be cheerful, others say he's been cursed since birth. Most agree he's part onion, now physically and spiritually. You line up with the others, bowl in hand. It's the same bowl you've used all voyage, and possibly the same spoon. You may have used it for other things, bailing water, catching bugs, defending yourself from Wilkins' late-night cheese dreams. But tonight it's a vessel of hope. Crib ladles. It makes a sound as it hits the bowl. A plop, a slop, a glorp. No one describes it out loud anymore. Words give it too much power. You inspect tonight's portion. Color brownish, texture difficult, aroma regret with a hint of clove. You sit cross-legged on the deck beside a coil of rope that smells faintly of anchovies. Wilkin joins you grinning as if he hasn't just been handed a bowl of edible sadness. I think mine twitched, he says. You nod solemnly. That means it's fresh. Bartram is already eating. Bartram never hesitates. He grew up on harsher things than Crib's stew. Legend says he once ate a boot, not for survival, just to win a bet. Old Hal has brought biscuits. Not fresh ones, those are mythical, but hard-dried, jaw-wrecking slabs of flour and old ambition. He dunks his in the stew until they soften, or at least surrender. There's chatter, but it's quiet. Not because of the food, it's just the evening lull. Bellies growling, bodies, tired brains, fuzzed by salt and sun. The day's work is behind you, the night's rest ahead. This is the hour when no one expects anything of you, except to chew and ideally not choke. Someone asks, "What do you think this meat is?" Wilkin replies, too late to ask now. Oswin, never one to waste a moment, holds his spoon like a quill and recites, "O stew of mystery, dark and bold, you taste of secrets, damp and old. with lumps of something not quite known. I chew and hope it's not a bone. Crib appears silently behind him. Oswin stops reciting. Someone coughs. The ship rocks gently. A spoon clinks against a bowl. Someone belches softly. It's not elegant, but it's honest. Then tea. A jug is passed around. Not the good stuff, we ran out of that during the goat sighting debacle, but pine needle brew with hints of seawater and old tin. You pour it into your cup. It steams. It smells faintly of hope. You sip. It's bitter. It's oddly sweet. It tastes like if a tree gave you a pep talk, and yet it warms you from throat to toes. You wrap both hands around the cup and let your shoulders sink a little. Dinner may not fill your soul, but it anchors you, reminds you you're alive, reminds you you're still here aboard a wooden marvel that floats against all logic, surrounded by men who are either your friends or at least not actively trying to stab you. Crib sits nearby now, quietly eating his own bowl. Even he looks slightly more human in the glow of lantern light. You wonder if the stew tastes better when he's not growling at it. Maybe someone starts humming. A low tune, familiar, wordless. It rises like steam above the group. Oswin hums along. Wilkin tries to harmonize and fails cheerfully. You lean back against a barrel, not the cursed one bowl resting on your knee, and watch the sky turn purple. Stars blink overhead. The sails rustle. A rope creaks like a lullaby sung by wood. This is what passes for peace aboard a ship. Not silence, not comfort, but warmth, slop, and company. You sip the last of the tea and nod to no one in particular. Dinner's done, you say, and for now so are you. Night watch always begins the same way. Someone groans, someone else trips over a rope, and you pull on your coat, grab your lantern, and shuffle up the ladder like a man sentenced to several hours of existential murmuring beneath the moon. It's not glamorous, the night watch. No sea monsters to battle, no pirate ships to outwit. Just walking the deck in slow loops, blinking into the dark, and trying not to fall asleep or hallucinate a whale in the mizzenmast. The lantern swings at your side. Its light is small, barely useful. The stars above you, however, are judging. They blink down cold, and countless like 1,000 ancient schoolmasters watching to see if you copied your homework. You look up anyway. Orion's belt crooked as ever. The Big Dipper tilted like it's mid-sip. And that one star Wilkin insists is actually the ghost of a forgotten island trapped in the sky for crimes against geography. You don't argue, not anymore. The sea is quiet tonight. No wind, just the slow, steady lapping of waves against the hull. The ship creaks like an old man dreaming, and somewhere nearby, a gull calls out once, long, low, mournful. You never see it. You never need to. It's always there. Some say it's a ghost. Others say it's Oswin practicing falsetto. Could be both. You begin your circuit of the deck. Step, creak, breathe, repeat. You check the ropes tight, the sails slack, the horizon empty as usual. The cursed barrel still there glistening slightly in the moonlight, like it's plotting something gentle but unnerving. You nod to it respectfully and move on. Night watch is when thoughts sneak in. You think about land, about bread, about conversations you never finished, songs you barely remember, faces that appear in dreams but blur in the daylight. You wonder how many leagues you've traveled, how many you have left, whether your boots will ever not smell like brine and cabbage. Wilkin joins you midway through the shift, dragging his feet and clutching a biscuit like a weapon. Anything he asks, just a gull, the one that judges. You nod. He sighs. It knows. You both walk in silence for a bit. It's a soft sort of camaraderie. Nothing needs saying, and so nothing is said. Just two figures pacing a creaking world made of wood and wishes trying to stay awake under a sky that never sleeps. Wilkin eventually sits down, mumbling something about listening for ghost fish. You let him. He's not on duty anyway. He just doesn't like sleeping through things. You pass old Hal on your next lap. He's got a cup of something steaming and mutters, "Don't trust the fog, though there is no fog." Not yet. You make a note of it anyway. Down below, the ship is sleeping, if such a thing can be said, of that symphony of snores, mutters, and the occasional crash that no one investigates until morning. Up here, it's just you, the stars, and the occasional groan from the timbers. And that's when you see it. Something on the horizon. Just a flicker, a shape, a light. Maybe a trick of your tired eyes. You stop, squint. There's a glow far off, low to the water, flickering like a lantern held by someone with very little regard for their wrist. You raise the spyglass. Nothing. Lower it. It's back. You raise it again. Gone. You wait. You think about waking the captain. Then you remember what happened last time you woke the captain, about the flickering light that vanished when viewed properly. You still owe him a biscuit for that. So instead, you write it in the log saw light on horizon. Possibly nothing, possibly everything. Either way, we remain afloat. You take another lap. The light doesn't come back. The gull does. You hum a little to yourself, a half-forgotten lullaby, or maybe a chanty about laundry. You're not sure anymore. The melody winds between your steps, tangling with the breeze that's finally stirring. The sails sigh. The ropes tug gently. The ship breathes again. Night watch is nearly over. You hand off your lantern to the next sailor, Oswin bleary-eyed, and already telling himself heroic tales of things he probably won't see. You nod to him. He nod back. "Stars still up there?" he asks. "Far as I can tell." He squints upward. "Don't like the way they look at me. Try not to confess anything, and they'll lose interest." You descend to your bunk, your bones humming with cold and peace, and a quiet pride that comes from keeping watch over a ship that mostly watches itself. You lie down, curl your coat around your shoulders, and let the creaks and sighs of timber and tide rock you gently toward sleep. Out there the stars blink, below the sea dreams, and above it all a lantern swings in the dark just in case. Every ship has a captain, and every captain, if he is worth his salt, and even more so if he is completely unbothered by logic, has a hat. Not just any hat, not a cap nor a kerchief, nor a floppy bit of cloth tied in the back. This hat is a statement. It is authority made wearable. It is the law of the sea, but stylish. Your captain's hat is a thing of wonder, tri-cornered despite this not being a tri-cornered era. Black though the sun has long since faded it to storm gray, trimmed in something that might once have been gold, or perhaps a particularly ambitious mustard. And most importantly, it never leaves his head. Not in storms, not in high winds, not even while bathing, which he claims he does by glaring the salt off. There are rumors that he sleeps in it. Others claim it's attached by mystical barnacle glue. Wilkin once swore he saw it turn slightly when someone tried to mutiny before the mutineer got a nosebleed and gave up. Wilkin also once spoke to a spoon for 3 days, so the story is up for debate, but no one denies the power of the hat. It is said that whoever wears the hat may declare arbitrary holidays, such as Half-Sock Thursday, pardon bad stew by saying it builds character, chart a course based on dreams, gull cries, or dice, override logic with the phrase "I've got a feeling." The hat you see isn't just fabric, it's a license, a signal, a ward against maritime nonsense, or perhaps a generator of it. The crew respects it deeply. Even Crib, who respects nothing and no one, bows his head slightly when it passes. You once saw a new sailor attempt to touch it. He spent the next 3 days mopping the ceiling, which shouldn't even be possible on a ship. And yet the captain made it so, because with the hat, the captain doesn't just enforce the laws of the sea, he invents them. Some of these rules are written nowhere, yet universally obeyed, like, no one eats the last biscuit without announcing it like a town crier. All albatross sightings must be followed by a dramatic pause and a wildly inaccurate prediction. The cook may never be asked what's in the stew. If he tells you, you are obliged to cry. If a rope is lying coiled perfectly, it must not be touched. It is a holy relic until tripped over. These laws are enforced not by punishment, but by tradition, superstition, and the hat's quiet disapproval. Once during a particularly still morning, Oswin made the mistake of suggesting the sails were just decorative at this point. The captain turned, slowly raised one eyebrow beneath the brim, and simply said, "That's enough poetry for today." Oswin didn't rhyme for a week. Sometimes you wonder, does the hat command the man, or does the man command the hat? You once caught it glinting in the moonlight during a storm, seemingly glowing from within. The wind howled, the waves roared, and the captain, perfectly dry, stood at the helm like a statue chiseled from good intentions and salt. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The hat was doing it for him. You asked Bartram once if he believed the hat was magic. Bartram, who had just bitten into a biscuit hard enough to jar his spine, said magic no, but it knows things. You didn't press the matter. Today the captain walks the deck hat, slightly tilted as if in conversation with the clouds. He nods once to no one in particular and makes a mark on the chart. Course change, he says. South by a whisper. No one asks what that means. The hat has spoken. You learn early in a sailor's life that you don't own a ship. You borrow it. You serve it. You try not to insult it by falling overboard. And perhaps most importantly, you share it with rats. Not city rats, not those dainty thin-tailed things that scurry through alleyways and jump at shadows. These are sea rats, broad-shouldered, beard-faced, bold. You once saw one dragging a biscuit tin like it was pushing a wheelbarrow. No one stopped him. He seemed very determined. They don't infest the ship. No, no. That implies you didn't invite them. These rats are tenants, long-term residents, possibly the original owners. The arrangement is unofficial, unspoken, and perfectly understood by both parties. It is known as the Treaty of the Lower Hold. Terms include We don't go below deck after midnight unless it's on fire. They don't run across our pillows while we sleep anymore. They get the crumbs. We get the loaves. If a rat is in a bucket, you must assume the bucket now belongs to the rat. No one knows when the treaty was formed. Some say it was signed in rat blood on a piece of moldy cheese. Others claim it emerged naturally over decades of quiet mutual loathing and grudging respect. You see them sometimes, just at the edge of the lantern light, small fuzzy silhouettes in the dark, pausing to sniff the air before darting back into the shadows. There's one affectionately named Gregory who seems to have developed a liking for Wilkins' socks. He's stolen 5, always the left foot. Wilkin has stopped asking questions. Old Hal swears he trained a rat once. Came when I whistled, he says. Sat on my shoulder like a parrot. Used to bring me scraps from Crib's bin. What happened to him, you ask? He married another rat. Moved to the cargo deck. They have children now. You decide not to dig further. One night, in a bout of curiosity and light insomnia, you crept down to the lower hold with a crust of bread in hand. You crouched by the crates, held out the offering, and waited. Minutes passed. The air smelled of rope salt and thyme. And then, movement. A rat emerged, small, plump, with eyes like polished buttons. It stared at you. You stared back. A moment passed. Then slowly, it took the crust from your hand, paused, and gave what could only be described as a nod. Diplomacy. They've never spoken, of course, but their gestures are clear. A rat dragging something up the stairs. Don't stop it, it earned that. A line of rats watching you change your socks. Accept it. You're part of the show now. There was an incident. Once Wilkin accused the rats of stealing his tobacco. He launched a full investigation which involved accusing Gregory setting up traps and shouting, I know it was you, into the lower hold at dusk. Next morning, Wilkin found his tobacco neatly returned. Alongside it, a single rat dropping. Interpret that how you will. Bartram believes the rats keep other vermin away. If not for them, he says we'd be up to our elbows in weevils and ghosts. You're not entirely sure how ghosts fit into that, but again, you don't press. The rats never take too much. They never get into the captain's quarters. They steer clear of the cursed barrel smart. They know the rules, and in return, you leave them alone, because there's something comforting about them in a way, a sign of continuity. The sea may be wide, the winds uncertain, and the food highly questionable, but the rats remain, silent witnesses to every voyage, loyal to no flag but their own, clever, industrious, and on occasion faintly judgmental. You lie in your hammock at night, listening to their little footsteps tapping softly across the beams. You imagine them holding meetings, exchanging crumbs, assigning scouts, maybe even telling stories about you. You smile, close your eyes, and whisper into the dark, "Good night, Gregory." Something squeaks in the shadows. Peace holds. You've weathered storms before, the kind that slap the sails like they owe the wind money, the kind that turn the sky greenish and the sea into a drunk, furious beast, the kind that make you tie your boots tighter just so your dignity doesn't wash overboard with your biscuit tin. But no matter how seasoned a sailor you are, storms always bring out the same thing: superstition. You could be the most rational man in the world, logical, educated, clean-shaven, not likely, but theoretically, and yet the moment thunder cracks like a cannon and the mainsail groans, like it's contemplating retirement, you start believing in things, like the old charm someone tied to the mast, like the don't say rabbit at sea rule, like Wilkins' pants. Yes, the lucky pair of pants. You first heard the tale during a squall off the coast of some island that may or may not have existed. The ship was heaving, rain was slicing sideways, and everyone was yelling very dramatic nautical things like haul the windward line and who tied this knot with their elbows. In the midst of this chaos, Wilkin emerged from below decks wearing those pants. They are a sight, threadbare, faded, striped vertically in a color that defies classification, somewhere between mustard and sorrow. They're too short in the leg, too roomy in the seat, and patched so many times they resemble a quilt that got into a bar fight. But the moment he put them on, the storm calmed. Slightly. We didn't sink. That was the key thing. Since then, those pants have become legend. Wilkin only wears them in moments of extreme danger. He has a ritual. He lights a candle. He hums an old sea tune that might be made up. He puts them on slowly, reverently, like armor. And then he grins and says, "They still fit," which is not true, but no one corrects him. Everyone has their superstitions. Oswin keeps a fish scale in his boot. Bartram rubs a knot on the prow for luck. Old Hal recites a poem backwards if a gull lands on the rigging. But Wilkin's pants are in a class of their own. There was one voyage where he forgot them, left them in port. You've never seen such panic. Cribb threatened to turn the ship around. The captain stood very still for 10 whole minutes. A replacement pair was offered but rejected. They weren't seasoned, Wilkins said solemnly. We sailed on. The storm that time not great. A mast cracked. A barrel of dried beans escaped and terrorized the lower deck. The stew turned blue, though that may have been unrelated. When we reached shore, Wilkin retrieved the pants, hugged them, whispered something. No one asked what. Now the pants are kept folded in a special pouch, sealed with rope and garlic, stowed in a chest marked Private Luck. Once a month they're aired out at dusk, never at dawn. No one questions this, because when the storm hits, and it always does, you want every sliver of luck you can get, even if it's stitched into a pair of pants that could legally be classified as a fabric-based hazard. And now, as clouds churn on the horizon and the barometer Oswin's knee starts clicking ominously, you see Wilkin rise. He says nothing. He walks below, and moments later, returns, wearing the pants. The crew nods. Even Cribb smiles. You haul lines, batten hatches, speak your charms. The wind rises. The ship groans. But so long as those pants flap bravely in the salt-laden air, slightly off-kilter and deeply undignified, you believe. Someone shouts it. Land ho. The two most beautiful words a sailor can hear, and also the two most deceptively complex ones. Because yes, land means food, real food, with shape and color and ingredients that didn't come from a barrel labeled maybe fish. It means sleep without the ship rocking like a drunk cradle. It means not being awakened by Wilkins' sleep mumbling or old Hal arguing with the rats again. It means fresh water, dry socks, and if fortune smiles, an ale that hasn't seen the inside of a salted boot. But it also means shore leave, which is never as restful as it sounds. First, there's the walk. After weeks or months aboard, your legs are calibrated to wobble and sway. Setting foot on unmoving ground feels unnatural, like gravity's suddenly gone uptight. You stagger, you flail, you look like a goose trying to curtsy. Wilkin once fell face first into a cabbage cart on arrival, said it was the most nutritious thing he'd eaten all week. Then there's the noise. The docks are loud. Barker's bells bribes livestock. The clatter of carts, the cries of merchants, and the one street musician who insists on playing a tune called Ode to a Dying Shrimp on a leaking flute. You miss the silence of the sea almost immediately. The crowds are worse. Too many elbows, too many perfumes, too many conversations happening at once. You catch fragments as you pass. And then she threw the eel at him. Not with that goat, I said 16 silver, and the bird sings insults. You don't want to know. You keep walking. Then, of course, there's the money problem. Or rather, the I had money problem. Sailors are notoriously skilled at spending everything in record time on items of dubious value. In just one afternoon ashore, Wilkin once purchased a magic pebble that changes color depending on mood. It's always green. A map to buried dreams. A goat. Briefly, the goat returned itself. You try to be wiser. You buy a loaf of crusty bread, a cup of hot stew, and a small bottle of something labeled Old Sea Dog's Elixir Do Not Shake. You eat. You sip. You regret the elixir. You wander through town with Oswin, who's trying to find someone to read his palm and tell him if he'll ever grow a third eyebrow. He claims it's ancestral. Crib has already vanished into a tavern that smells like cheese and ambition. Bartram is bartering for a spoon, and all the while you think, I should be relaxing. I should enjoy this. I should stretch my legs and forget the sea. But you can't, because land is weird. It doesn't hum under your feet. It doesn't rock gently. It doesn't creak when you whisper to it. It doesn't know you. And so, after half a day, when you see the ship's mast rising above the rooftops, you feel a twinge of longing. You walk slowly back down the docks. The crew returns in waves, some laughing, some broke, some already dozing on crates like stray cats. Wilkin is holding a hat that wasn't his before. Old Hal smells like pickled onions and a hint of despair. You board the ship. It groans beneath your boots. It welcomes you. You find your hammock, your favorite rope, your familiar cup with the chipped rim. You exhale. Land may offer its comforts, its colors, its wild flurry of smells and choices. But only the sea knows the shape of your sleep. Only the ship knows how to hold you when the world tilts. You smile into the dark. Home is strange, but you're home. The hammock creaks beneath you. Just a little, just enough. Like a lullaby made of rope and rhythm. You lie still, hands behind your head, staring up at the beams above. The ship sways gently, not in a way that makes you seasick. No, this is the kind of sway you'd pay extra for if you could. Everything is soft now. The shadows, the air, the silence between snores, and the occasional muttered dream from someone nearby. Even the rats are quiet, perhaps curled in their own nests, dreaming of biscuits and ropes. You think of nothing in particular. A loaf of bread, the way the sea looked at sunrise, the shape of Bartram's beard when wet, the soft thunk of crib dropping a ladle, the stars. Your eyes close, open, close again. The ship rocks on. You don't need to go anywhere right now. You don't need to be anyone but a tired sailor rocked by wood and tide and time. And the hammock faithful thing that it is keeps swinging back and forth. You listen, not to the wind, not to the waves, to the wood. The ship is made of trees long fallen, but it lives still in groans and sighs and soft, sleepy stretches. It breathes as you do. In, out, in, out. Your breath slows to match it. A rope twitches overhead. The sails settle. Somewhere a lantern swings its flame, barely flickering. You are not alone, but you are safe. The ship knows you, and it is in no rush. The scent of salt is everywhere, but now it's not sharp, not stinging. It's familiar, like a warm coat or a favorite chair. Beneath it, the smell of rope, of biscuit dust, of old wood sun-warmed and rain-worn. It smells like a life that belongs to you. You nestle deeper into your blanket. The wool is scratchy in all the right ways. You sigh, and the ship creaks in reply. Above deck, the stars are watching, but not harshly, not judgmentally. They blink like sleepy candles scattered across the black tablecloth of night. Some twinkle, some stay still, all of them ancient steady and far too big to worry about anything you've done lately. You don't need to see them to feel them. Even below deck, you know they're there, like sentinels or lullabies. You drift, not just into sleep, into something deeper, wider, calmer. You are part of the ship, part of the sea, part of every wave that rocks you, every breath of wind that sighs through the ropes. You do not worry. You do not plan. You are held, safe in the belly of the ship, cradled by the ocean, rocked by time. Sleep comes, and you let it.